I have already discovered what Rox D. Zebek's master plan is to become the king of the world and overthrow the world government. And the most curious thing of all is that it is exactly the same plan that Blackbeard has, and I am going to tell you right now. To say, as always, that this kind of video takes a lot of work, so I would really appreciate a big like and for you to subscribe to the channel to see more videos. And if you have put the video on in the background for something, let me know in the comments what you are doing. If you are eating, enjoy your meal. If you are going to sleep, a good night kiss, and let me know in the comments what you are doing, as you keep telling me more curious things and you know I love reading them. Now let's start with the theory, because it's crazy and you're going to love it. The plan of Rox D. Zebek and Blackbeard to conquer the world. Rox D. Zebek was one of the most feared pirates in all of history, with a declared dream of becoming the king of the world, even above being the king of the pirates. His excessive ambition led him to directly confront the world government, as he knew that to rule the world, he first had to destroy the current regime. Decades later, Marshal D. Teach, Blackbeard, who turned out to be Zebek's son, seems to be following in his father's footsteps throughout the entire history of One Piece. Oda has given us many hints that Teach is practically executing the same plan as his master, Rox, but with certain adjustments to his style to achieve that goal of world domination. In this theory, I am going to explain step by step what the plan is, from the formation of the invincible crew to the takeover of a safe territory. I will explain the entire importance of the two fruits mentioned by Rox and the two that Blackbeard has, and many other things that have gone somewhat unnoticed by everyone. The ambition to be the king of the world. Rox D. Zebek had a clear objective: to overthrow the world government and rule in its place. According to Sengoku, Rox wanted to be the king of the world. This was not a metaphor. Rox literally planned to take absolute control of the known world, something no pirate had openly attempted. To achieve this, he did not hesitate to attack even world nobles and their slaves, all during his campaign of terror. His brutality and excessive ambition made him a direct enemy of the world government. In fact, the Navy came to consider him a terrorist due to the magnitude of destruction he caused by daring to challenge the world's greatest taboos. Rox investigated forbidden secrets, even discovering the existence of Imu-sama, the shadow monarch of the One Piece world. He knew there was a hidden power behind the throne and now set out to destroy it. It is not surprising that Blackbeard, heir to his blood and will, follows that same dream. It has been confirmed that Teach is the son of Zebek, and interestingly, he has been replicating several steps of Rox's path. Teach inherited the ambition to take over the world, and even pays tribute to his father in details like the name of his flagship, Saber of Zebek, and in reclaiming the former base of Rox, the pirate island Hachinosu. Although in personality, it is true that they differ. Rox was more reckless, more impulsive, while Teach is more cautious and strategic. But both share a philosophy: power is everything, and the end justifies the means. And we will see how this motto or phrase quite guides their actions. First step, recruiting the most powerful. The first step of Rox to execute his plan was to gather a crew of extremely powerful individuals, and all this in the shortest possible time. He could not conquer the world alone. He needed formidable allies. How did he achieve in a few years what takes others decades? Well, this is where Rox's creativity and cruelty come into play. He proclaimed himself a pirate of Davy Jones, and was adept at the tradition of the Davy back fight. In other words, Rox recruited strong pirates by challenging them in games or fights, earning the right to add them to his crew. Unlike Foxy, who used the David back fight in a comedic tone, Rox used it with deadly effectiveness, focusing on quality over quantity. He absorbed the most notorious and powerful pirates of the time. Thus, his crew was filled with living legends: Whitebeard, Charlotte Linlin, who was Big Mom, Kaido, Captain John, or Choku, a true lineup of the toughest at sea. There was no camaraderie among them, but Rox kept them united under the promise of great fortune and common goals. Whitebeard himself would later admit that he had quite a few bad experiences under Zebek's command, but he acknowledged his tremendous strength. In short, Rox assembled an all-star selection of pirates in record time, and Blackbeard, a few decades later, did something very similar, though in his own style. After the Battle of Marineford, Teach invaded Impel Down, the great underwater prison. All this with the intention of recruiting the worst criminals imprisoned there. He headed to the deepest level, level 6, Eternal Hell, where the pirate prisoners were so dangerous that the world government had erased their names from history. And what did Teach do? He organized a bloody free-for-all battle among all the prisoners of level 6 and offered to join his crew only to the strongest survivors. The result? Well, 4 of those legendary monsters emerged victorious without a scratch after the carnage. They are Katarina Devon, San Juan Wolf, Vasco Shot, and Avalo Pizarro, who joined Teach's crew, adding to the original members. But later, he also freed the former jailer Shiryu of the Rain, another formidable fighter who agreed to join him. Teach thus drastically increased the power of his crew, and all this in a single move, recruiting individuals whose level of danger was considered unthinkable by the Navy itself. This strategy of recruiting the strongest available is a clear parallel between Rox and Teach. Neither of them formed a team of close friends like Luffy. They gathered a band of unscrupulous, ambitious individuals united by convenience and a thirst for power. In fact, Oda himself draws a parallel. The relationship between Rox and his subordinates was as dysfunctional in the sense that they all hated each other as Teach's with his own. There is only a pact of interests, but for practical purposes, it worked. Both crews became among the most fearsome in their respective eras. It is worth noting that Teach took the lead in another aspect, as he even recruited a former Marine Admiral. During the 2-year time skip, Blackbeard incorporated none other than Kuzan Aokiji, the former Admiral with the Hiei no Mi fruit, the Ice Fruit. This signing was surprising to everyone and demonstrates Teach's ability to convince very powerful individuals, or at least ally with them. Aokiji became part of the so-called 10 Titanic captains of Blackbeard, who are the core of his strength. With all this, Teach's crew is today one of the most formidable, perhaps comparable only to the former Rox in terms of power concentration per person. In summary, Rox and Blackbeard understood that to challenge the world, they needed to surround themselves with the worst and strongest allies possible, and they wasted no time in gathering them. One used pirate duels and tricks, and the other used a mutiny in the largest prison, but both achieved a fearsome crew. Next step, Hachinosu, the pirate island as a base of operations. With a powerful crew secured, the next logical step of the plan was to have a safe territory from which to operate. Sailing eternally on a ship leaves the pirate exposed to being ambushed on the open sea. A headquarters on solid ground offers defense, resources, and a place to gather more allies without limit. Both Rox and Teach identified the same strategic location, Hachinosu, the legendary pirate island in the New World. 44 years ago, Rox D. Chebek invaded Hachinosu and conquered it. According to what was mentioned in the manga, Rox made some kind of clandestine deal with the world government to complete this operation. 44 years ago, Rox D. Zebek invaded Hachinosu and conquered it. Basically, Hachinosu became the base from which he planned to launch the war against the world. As an anecdote, Zebek remodeled the island a little. He blew off 2 pieces of the large skull-shaped rock that dominates Hachinosu, forming the typical empty sockets that quite resemble a pirate skull. That is to say, the Skull Island of Hachinosu, as we know it with the eye holes, was the work of Rox himself as a symbol that it was his territory. But why Hachinosu? Well, it's an ideal place for pirates. Historically, it is said that this island is where the first pirate assembly was held. It's in the New World and also relatively close to the last part of the Grand Line and outside the control of any major nation. For Rox, offering that island as a refuge attracted even more followers. What pirate wouldn't want to live on the pirate island freely? Moreover, from Hachinosu, they could plan calmly. Without fear of a surprise attack from the Navy, they would have to launch a campaign in a Yonku territory to take it, which they wouldn't do lightly. In short, Rox was securing his rear very well. Now, moving to the present, Marshal D. Teach also made Hachinosu his base. In fact, he defeated Ochoku, who apparently was still around, and took back the island for himself. Hachinosu is the headquarters of the Blackbeard pirates, just as it was for the Rox pirates in their time. This closes a historical circle. The son reclaimed the father's stronghold, but Teach has gone further in one sense. He seeks to legitimize Hachinosu as a recognized kingdom. And Blackbeard has said that he wants the world government to recognize him as the official ruler of Hachinosu, similar to how Wano was Kaido's territory. In other words, he wants to turn Hachinosu into a country, and this is something Rox would never have done. Zebek was too proud and rebellious to negotiate with the government. Teach, on the other hand, is pragmatic. If he can turn Hachinosu into a legally established pirate kingdom, he would gain indirect protection and more resources. Having a base territory also allows you to host a huge number of allies. A pirate ship can only hold a few hundred people, but on an island, you can gather entire armies. He planned precisely to use Hachinosu to amass massive forces. All this for the preparation for war. Let's remember that one of his goals was to indirectly recruit all the giants of Elbaf eventually. And obviously those giants wouldn't fit on a ship, he would need an island to mobilize them. Well, the same applies to Teach. In Hachinosu, not only are there his 10 Titanic captains, but also thousands of pirates under his command, as well as prisoners and other people. For example, Kobe was recently imprisoned there as a hostage, and that triggered Garp's raid on the island, which showed us a bit of the chaos reigning in Hachinosu under Teach. In conclusion, the world domination plan required a secure base, and both Rox and Teach established it in Hachinosu. From that hideout filled with outlaws, they could plan the next and most crucial step, unleashing the war against the world government at the opportune moment. Next step, a prophesied war and 2 key devil fruits. Rox was not a fool. He knew that confronting the world government would mean unleashing a monumental war against the rest of the world. This is not something that can be improvised. According to what we know now, Xebec was completely convinced that this war had to happen eventually. In fact, he said it was a destiny marked on the world's calendar, a destined date on which that battle against the government would be fought. It is possible that Rox obtained information from some ancient source, perhaps a mural in Elbaf like the one we saw, some prophecy passed down through generations of giants, since the giants seem to have knowledge of very ancient legends, or perhaps something from the character's past that we still do not know, because let us not forget that Xebec seems to have explored forbidden topics and secrets of the Void Century. So we assume that he might have come across signs of an impending apocalyptic war, and the truth is that even in the present, the idea of a final war is no longer just a theory. The world government itself anticipates it. In the current chapters, after the events of Wano and the Egghead incident, it is said that the last war is approaching. The holy knights of the world government are on the move. And one of the immediate objectives is to subdue the giant race of Elbaf before the conflict erupts. They know that no army is as powerful as Elbaf's, so they want to neutralize that threat and turn it into an ally. This reflects that the importance of the giants in the final war is enormous. Given something that Rox had already deduced decades ago, to win this eventual war, Rox designed a plan with multiple components. He already had his elite pirates and his base, so what else did he need? According to his own words to his crew, he needed to obtain 2 specific devil fruits. These 2 fruits would be the key to overthrowing the world government. One of them was said to be in Elbaf, and the other was not explicitly revealed where. But we can speculate that perhaps he knew of its existence somewhere in the Grand Line, but we have no idea what it is, what it's called, or what it does, or anything. This is initially to win the war against the world government, which they know will come, because according to Rox, it is a destined day. This they can know, as I say, from the mural of Elbaf, or another prophecy, or something we might see in the past of Rox or Blackbeard. Regarding the matter of the 2 fruits, seeing the parallel we have with the other character who is Marshal D. Teach Blackbeard, we can speculate that it could be one of these options. And one is the Yammy Yammy or the Gura Gura. And since we know, as I said, that one of these fruits is the fruit of Elbaf, we can assume that the other would be the Yammy Yammy or the Gura Gura. The first thing about the Yammy Yammy is that Teach says it is the fruit he was waiting for, that this fruit chose him, and he spent more than 20 years in Whitebeard's crew waiting for this fruit to appear, and gave up his entire life just because it was the necessary fruit for something. Something that has not been fully explained yet, but we can assume it is obviously related to Blackbeard's plan, Rox's plan, and the plan to become the king of the world. And there are 2 possibilities here. The first is that he simply wanted that fruit because it was one of the 2 he needed to fulfill his plan in Rox. And the other is that the Yammy Yammy was necessary to obtain 2 fruits in his body, apart from the Yammy Yammy itself, which would be 3 in total. And that would make one of those 2 necessary fruits the one he already has, the Gura Gura, the earthquake fruit. And this could be for several reasons. The first is that Blackbeard has already consumed the fruit, and that, well, is not done just for the sake of it. Obviously, he is not going to have such an exaggeratedly elaborate plan to consume a random fruit. The second reason is that this fruit, as stated by Sengoku, has the power to destroy the world, and we have seen that Sengoku knows many things from the past that he does not reveal, such as what the letter D seems to mean. And we saw this with Law in Dressrosa when he was talking to him, and we saw that he implied he knew something about the meaning of the D. So imagine the things this man knows that Oda still doesn't want to reveal to us. But the third reason is that it's possible that Rox D wanted this fruit. Xebec at the time, since we still don't know why he went to God Valley exactly, and it is very possible that he went for one of those prizes offered by the God Valley hunt, which, as we saw in Kuma's flashback, some of these prizes were fruits, including Kuma's, Ivankov's, or even Kaido's. So we can assume that an earthquake fruit like the Gura Gura could be among them, with this being the place where Whitebeard consumed it given how the situation was unfolding. Since Xebec ended up dying, presumably sinking with the island, this is what we have been told, but the reality is that Whitebeard ended up consuming the fruit. But the real reason why Rox D. Xebec and his crew went to the island was to obtain one of these prizes, specifically the Gura Gura fruit. Here we can suppose that, as Xebec said, he wanted 2 fruits, but he wanted Harold to consume one and not himself. That is, perhaps he did not have the capacity or the necessary knowledge to make him able to consume 2 fruits, because we know that in the world of One Piece, at least what we have been told, it is true that we have not seen anyone do it so far, but we assume it is so, is that you cannot consume 2 devil fruits. If you consume one, it is like the maximum limit, because if not, your body would explode. Therefore, if a fruit was an Elbaf, as he himself said, it could be that he went for the Gura Gura to have his own and continued trying to convince Harold to fight on his side. That is, if he needed 2 fruits and secured his own, he only had to convince Harold to consume the fruit that was an Elbaf, and in this way, his plan would be accomplished. This way, we solve half of the mystery of the fruits that Rox or Blackbeard needed, and there will be another fruit of which we only know that, according to Rox, it was located in Elbaf. And something else that we will discuss, and that no one has noticed yet. But let's pause for a moment on the topic of the fruits, and move on to another important point that Rox mentions, and that the manga itself treats as an unsolvable problem, and it's the topic of Galela, the Carpenters of Galela. And in the chapter of the One Piece manga, Galela is mentioned as giant carpenters who are frozen somewhere and were captured. Furthermore, it is implied that it was by the world government, something for which we currently do not know the reason or anything. But we also know about these people who are frozen in Punk Hazard in the underground ice area, mainly because they are shown in a panel of the manga that Chopper and Nami found. Why do they need these people? Why do they need these giant carpenters? We do not know yet, but it can be speculated that it might be related to a giant ship, whether it is Pluton to rebuild it again, the Noah's Ark to fill it with pirates and invade Mary Joaz, or even to free slaves. Or it might even be related to another mysterious giant ship, Thriller Bark. But since that is still a mystery for which we do not have enough clues, let's focus on another point of the same topic. And the issue is presented that being missing or dead, they would be of no use. But this has an easy solution, and we might even have several solutions. In the case of Rox, it is true that I don't know how he wanted to do it, but with Blackbeard, we do have it, and we have to focus on 2 people with a somewhat close relationship with Blackbeard. The first is the most recent recruit, Akiji, the former Marine Admiral and bearer of the Ice Fruit, which could perhaps be used to thaw these people. This may seem to make no sense, but it is very possible that these people were artificially frozen, likely by the same fruit, which would mean it might be possible to reverse the effects if you are the bearer of the same, leaving them free and intact. But even so, this is not all, because depending on how they were frozen, it is possible they could preserve their bodies, but not their lives, meaning they might be dead. For example, in the case of Saul, who was also a frozen giant, it is true that he ended up being alive, and we have seen him today, but it is a different case. As Aokiji did it on purpose, it is something done intentionally. Most likely with these giants, it was not like that, since if they were frozen, presumably by the world government, it was not exactly to keep them alive, but rather the opposite. In fact, as I say, in the manga this is mentioned, that perhaps even if they find them, they are likely dead. But here another character comes into the equation that we have seen linked to Teach lately, and it is precisely Gecko Moria, bearer of a fruit capable of resurrecting people, in quotes. And in fact, we have already seen that he was capable of reviving an ancient giant, who died frozen, being this Ors. So Oda could make one of those parallels he likes so much, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's something he's had in mind for a long time. In this way, this part of Rox's plan would be completed by his son, Blackbeard. So now let's go back to what the other fruit is that he wants, or rather, needs to complete his plan. And we know that this is the fruit found in Elbaf, the famous legendary fruit that has been mentioned several times, but about which we still have no information. The only thing we supposedly know is that Loki ate that fruit, and we can't even trust this information 100%. But I think I have been able to figure out what this famous fruit is and why it is needed. The thing is, according to Loki, he is the sun god who would destroy the world. With this, we can assume that his fruit is related to this, and logically should be the fruit of the sun god, but this is impossible because Luffy already has it. And we also know that in the world of One Piece, there are no two identical fruits. So here could come a spectacular plot twist that would solve all the past problems with this fruit and all the plot holes that existed, which were not few. The thing is that the legendary fruit of Elbaf was the fruit of Nika. Yes, the one Luffy has. And before anyone jumps on me, listen to me until the end. The thing is that either when the fruit was placed there in Elbaf, or at some point that fruit was changed without the others being aware. In other words, the fruit of Nika is what they believe they had stored. The fruit of the sun god, of war, of liberation, or however each person calls it, since that religion is very established there, and he is like the ultimate god of Elbaf. But at some point in history, it was replaced by another. The how and when is certainly irrelevant, so I won't go into that much. But then, what reasons are there to think that? The key is in the fruit for which it was substituted and the one Loki has, which is the same fruit with which we, the viewers, were also deceived for 20 years. The Gomu Gomu fruit. Throughout the story, we were led to believe that Luffy had the rubber fruit because he stretched and his body had exactly these properties. Something we finally saw was not the case, and he had the Nika fruit, which also gave you those properties. In fact, the biggest plot hole in all of this was something like the Gorosei, who have known Luffy for a long time, not knowing that the Gomu Gomu fruit was the Nika fruit they had been searching for so long, and as they said, it had been lost and inactive for 800 years. Well, all this is resolved if we assume that the Gomu Gomu exists and that it is the fruit for which they replace the Nika fruit in Elbaf. They are probably almost identical fruits physically. And by not being consumed, this would explain why no one in Elbaf noticed. You have a fruit that looks a lot like the one you've always had, and you don't pay attention to its exact form. And as generations pass, no one consumes it, and it remains there. You believe that this fruit is the one you've been told about. This would also explain why the Gorosei didn't suspect Luffy, because they believed that Nika's fruit was in Elbaf guarded by giants. We believe that the world government tried to take control of the country several times, not only for its military power, but possibly because they wanted the Nika fruit as well. But this goes a bit further, and if we look at the character of Shanks, who is the key piece in all of this, Shanks is the character with the best relationship with Elbaf among all the characters in One Piece. And possibly he realized that the fruit there was not the Nika fruit, but rather the Gomu Gomu. So, this would also explain why Shanks attacked the world government's ship, which supposedly carried the Gomu Gomu because he knew it was Nika's and, according to him, he was the boy of the prophecy. So in this way, he would have the fruit and could carry out the plan, but everything changed upon meeting Luffy and seeing in him Roger's will, assuming that Luffy was the chosen one, and by indirectly making him eat the fruit, leaving the chest casually open there on top. Of course, Shanks, because the observation haki you had didn't even help you realize that they were trying to eat the fruit that had cost you so much to obtain and was so important. which in the present would make Loki believe he has the Nika fruit, but he would have the Gomu Gomu, the original, and Luffy would believe he has the Gomu Gomu, but he would have the Nika one, which leads us to the fact that the fruit Rocks needed, and now Blackbeard is the Nika fruit, the one Luffy has. But why did he need it? For power? Not quite like that. The thing is, according to Rocks, for the fruit to reach its maximum potential, it must be consumed by Harold, who is the king of Elbaf. So if we analyze this fruit a bit as something that turns you into a god, especially for the giants, and that furthermore, to reach its maximum potential, it needs to be consumed by the king of Elbaf. Which leads us to the conclusion that the importance of the fruit's power does not lie so much in the power the fruit grants you, or in the physical sense, but the political power it grants you, the power to control the masses of giants, which, as I have told you several times, whoever controls the giants of Elbaf could dominate the world because they would have enough power to do so. And here, with the topic of controlling the giants, we could return to Galela, which, as we have been told in the manga, are giants. So by freeing, resurrecting them, they could make them do whatever they want, because they would have the power to control the giants at will. Perfectly closing the plan of Rocks and Blackbeard, completely ready to be executed. And with the question of why exactly Galela is needed in this equation, will we see Blackbeard complete the plan, or will he fall short like Rocks D. Zebek? I don't know, but Oda has already given us enough clues to understand each plan, and it's brilliant. So let's do a quick review of the plan to make everything clear and visualize from afar the madness that the end of One Piece is going to be. The first step we mentioned is to assemble a powerful crew in record time. Rocks formed it with duels, and by recruiting the strongest pirates of his era, and Teach did it by freeing the worst prisoners from Impel Down, and even signing on a former admiral. Both prioritized strength over loyalty, creating bands of formidable individuals with aligned interests, but without emotional ties. Then they secured a territory with a safe base, Hachinosu. Rocks took the pirate island and turned it into his headquarters, planning the fall of the government from there, and Teach occupies the same island today, having even fortified it more and seeking to legitimize it. The bases allow them to gather resources, allies, and plan without direct interference. Then they need two key devil fruits, like the Gura Gura and the other fruit that would be the Hito Hito Modelonica. Teach now possesses the Gura Gura and the Yami Yami, which allowed him to obtain it, replicating the destructive part, and it remains to be seen if he will go after the Nika fruit that Luffy has. Then we have the Giants of Galela, who are frozen, which Rocks knew about and wanted to obtain, and we have seen that Teach has the means with Aokiji and Moria to free them and even resurrect them if they are dead, and he is probably already considering it, thus completing the extra military resource that his father longed for. Then we have the control of Elbaf and its warriors, as Rocks tried to ally with Harold, repeatedly knowing that the giants were the decisive factor. Teach has not yet shown his hand regarding Elbaf, but the current situation with Luffy allied with friendly giants, the government trying to subdue the island, suggests that the battle for the soul of Elbaf could be a crucial element for the final saga. If Teach somehow manages to gain influence over the giants, perhaps through Loki or some trick, he will have fulfilled Rocks' dream of using them as the spearhead of the war. Then we have the heir to Rocks' will, and let's not forget that it is now canon that Teach is Zebek's son. Sengoku didn't even know this, and it's a secret kept by few. But this implies that Zebek's will literally lives in Teach. The manga puts it poetically, the dream of world domination would be inherited by his son. We see how even Teach named his ship in honor of Zebek and took back Hachinosu, closing the circle. Teach is more cowardly in direct combat. He runs from Akainu, something Rocks would never do, but he is also more patient and calculating. Now the big question, can Blackbeard complete Rocks' plan? The story of One Piece shows us that inherited dreams often try to be realized, but also that the new era brings its own candidates to stop them. Luffy, our protagonist, literally carries the power of the Nika fruit that Rocks needed and embodies the antithesis of Zebek in ideology. Garp, the hero who defeated Rocks, is Luffy's grandfather, and Teach, Rocks' son, was responsible for the death of Ace, Luffy's brother, Roger's son. The conflict between Luffy and Teach is inevitable, and it will be the clash of these inherited wills. The son of freedom against the darkness of domination. Oda has been planting the seeds of this final confrontation for a very long time. We have already seen Teach make calculated moves, capturing Kobe, attacking Amazon Lily, stealing from Law, all this to consolidate his position before the Great War. We also know that Shanks has a good relationship with Elbaf and with the Giants, and it is very possible that Elbaf will be the stage where the final pieces move. There is the enormous arsenal of the giant warriors, and also the knowledge of Ohara with Saul and the books. And potentially, their teach could attempt his move regarding the Giants or Luffy. Will we see Whitebeard manage to awaken the frozen giants of Punk Hazard and unleash them against the government? Will he succeed in stealing the fruit from Luffy, or fail in the attempt? Will the story of God Valley repeat, where there is a last-minute alliance, Roger and Garp? That defeated Xebec, but this time with Luffy, perhaps Smoker, Kobe, or other allies facing Teach. What is clear is that Oda has already given us practically all the clues to understand Rock's plan and how Teach is executing it. All those plots converge. We will have an unprecedented climatic war. Giants, marines, revolutionaries, pirates of all kinds, ancient weapons, gods of the sun, of darkness. The stage is set for an epic saga finale. Rock's D. Xebec was about to achieve it 38 years ago, but was stopped in extremis. Marshal D. Teach is determined not to fail where his father fell. Can he be stopped in time? I trust that Luffy and the others will be able to stop him, but with Oda, well, you never know. The most important thing is for you to leave your opinion of the theory in the comments. Whether you agree, disagree, have something to add, or if you liked it, leave it all in the comments, because you know I read all of you. You can even debate with yourselves in the comments. If you want to contribute a theory, comment, and leave it all there to see how people go crazy debating with each other. You know that if you liked the video, you can leave a big like, subscribe to the channel for more,